lot of ground to cover. Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm Josh Rosenthal, clinical psychologist, the owner of Manhattan Psychology Group. And today is our second webinar in our three-part series. Today we're going to be talking about disruptive behavior and ODD in children and adolescents. Yesterday we spoke about ADHD, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about anxiety. So I hope to see you. If you joined yesterday, thanks for coming back. If you're going to be joining tomorrow, look forward to talking to you as well tomorrow. And the recording is we're recording this, so you don't have to worry about memorizing any of the slides. So I'm going to do some psychoeducation about oppositional defiant disorder. We're going to talk about assessment and diagnosis. Talk a lot about parent management training, which is sort of key to working with kids with ODD. Some family therapy options, some individual therapy options, and then some main takeaways, talk about resources, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. So we're going to be using, I have Beth, our marketing specialist, and Anne, our recruitment specialist here today, and they're sort of in the background helping out. So we're going to be using the chat box for posting links, and we're going to put some polls out and some resources, so keep your eye out for that. And then we're going to be using the Q&A feature. If you have a question, please put it into the Q&A, not into the chat box. And then I'm going to try my best to get to the Q&A at the end. We're going to share a feedback survey on Friday. We're going to send in an email on Friday after we're done with the three-part series that's going to have a feedback survey and links to all three videos, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So you don't have to worry about any information getting missed. So just make sure to check your junk or spam folder on Friday. We cannot provide CEU certificates at this time, but you can use your registration as proof of attendance. So if that is really important to you, just know that we will not be able to do that. We're working on it, but not today. Next slide. There we go. So I'm a licensed psychologist since 2008, and I specialize with working with kids and families, anxiety, ADHD, ODD. All these are sort of my sweet spot. And I'm also I started a summer treatment camp called Big Apple Day program, which ran for many years in Manhattan, and then also a progress monitoring tool called the Electronic Daily Report Card. And I also supervise students from a couple local universities. Next slide. About our company, we're a little unique in that we're multidisciplinary. So we're composed of psychologists and neuropsychologists and board certified behavior analysts and special educators. And we provide all kinds of evidence-based treatments, both testing and treatment services for birth to boomers, so all ages, and specialize in most childhood and adult issues, anxiety, ADHD, ODD, tics, autism. We have a big autism program. School issues, we work obviously remotely like everyone else, but we do a lot of in-home work and in-school work. And we have a brick and mortar office on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And we're doing clinical services in those three states, New York, New Jersey, and Florida. And we do some national consulting and educational services like this webinar. And a big learning foundation that I'm really passionate about is the growth mindset. So trying to hire and train and work with families and teach a growth mindset is really powerful. And if you don't know what that is, I highly suggest you look into it. It's a really, really cool thing to learn and sort of build into your daily life. Our mission, there's a couple psychologists that are featured. So Margaret, Dr. Azega was featured yesterday, since she's going to be doing our ADHD educational series and parent training, virtual parent training group. Today I'm going to be featuring Erica Stapert, who's an expert in working with kids with ODD. She's going to be leading our educational three-part series starting in a couple of weeks, as well as the virtual parent training group. So you want to just look for her. And then also Dr. Rosen is going to be in charge of our anxiety, and she'll be running those groups. I'll talk about her tomorrow. In terms of mission, very clear for us. We want to improve the trajectory for individuals and their families. I want to get in early. I want to partner with the families and try to do my best to change the trajectory for those kids. And if we work hard together, our vision of creating confident, independent, and productive kids, and who have connected, meaningful relationships, then we're doing good. We're on the right path. So our mission and vision are really, really important to the work that we do here at Manhattan Psychology Group. So if you have one takeaway for today in terms of working with ODD, I mean, there's a lot of information here and I don't expect you to learn it all, but what I want you to take away is that working with kids with ODD is really about relationships. ODD is a breakdown in relational problems. There's other things going on for sure, but the key is the relationship that this child has with the outside world. And I'm going to focus on that a lot. So just remember that, put that in your back pocket. I'm going to come back to that. So the prevalence of ODD is sort of in the middle compared to other disorders. It's about 4.5% total kids. Boys are twice as likely than girls. The big thing here, again, put this in your back pocket, is catching them young. We really need to catch these kids before age 4, because age 4, they start to become more socialized, putting them in nursery schools and daycare centers and preschool. And if we can't get ahead of it, it's going to cause all kinds of problems. ODD, untreated ODD, can cause major impairments in health, school, and relationships. And as the children get older, it just gets harder and harder to treat. So early detection before age 4 is really, really important. It's also pretty highly comorbid. So if you have ODD, the likelihood that you probably have ADHD as well. There's also a lot of overlap with autism, depression. It makes sense, right? Like if you have ODD, a lot of things are not going well in your life. So you're more likely to be depressed, more likely to have anxiety, and then about 10% of ODD kids turn out to have conduct disorder. And there's lots of different pathways, and we're not going to talk about all the different pathways, of the kids that, go on from ODD into conduct disorder and having, criminal issues. It's just too expansive for the talk today, but there are different pathways by which ODD kids mature, and the ones that obviously become conduct disordered are going to have the hardest trouble. Again, intervening early before age 4 is going to be key no matter what. So I'm going to try to focus on that as much as possible. So what's a possible pathway? How do you get ODD, right? Usually, and this is just, this is sort of like a combination of lots of different studies and data put together. No one can say for sure, but what we tend to see is you have a child with a temperament and a personality that is like irritable and quick to anger, difficult to calm, and difficult to soothe, and sort of stubborn, a little bit more rigid. A child who is difficult to soothe causes all kinds of issues for the parents, because the parent needs to be able to soothe their child. And when they can't do it, it's bad for the parent, it's bad for the parent's morale, and it's bad for the child too. So that's kind of where the starting point is. And then what happens is you have this child that's difficult to soothe, quick to anger, and then it becomes an environmental difficulty. So they're matched with a parent who is having a really hard time with this. And so it causes attachment issues between the child and the parent. The parent tries their best, but maybe is overly harsh, or the opposite, overly permissive, which could lead to a lot of stress in the home, or lack of predictable structure. So the child is sort of unable to get what they need from the environment, and they start to develop really maladaptive ways of viewing the environment, really like strong levels of negativity and pessimism towards parents and authority figures. And that's the problem, is that they take this early life experience of having a really difficult time with their parents and their parents having a very difficult time with them. And then it just moves outside the home. And that's why it's so dangerous for them to move, 4 and 5, get into school and not have proper treatment. And they develop this sort of negative affective style, which means that, sort of low empathy, low connection with other people. So the way that we get, meaning and enjoyment out of having a connected relationship, they don't really get that. And they start to view people as objects rather than people with feelings. And then what the child does is they start to use disruptive behavior. So not listening, hurting people, getting in fights and lying and stealing, all this really negative behavior as getting attention and time and getting their needs met. And it just becomes like this vicious pattern that we really try to break as early as possible when we have the most control over the kids. And that would be, before age 4. So this is one possible pathway. It's not predictive, but it tends to be what we see. So how do you assess ODD? Again, it's going to start out with a really strong clinical interview. I think that's really what you're paying for when you hire an experienced clinician, someone that has done this hundreds of times. They know what questions to ask. They're really good at playing detective and figuring out how did this present. This doesn't come out of nowhere. You don't just wake up one day and child has ODD. It's been a pattern, a long standard pattern. And so you're looking at, how did we get here? What's the impairment across different settings? ODD kids are going to have lots of self-esteem issues, terrible pair relationships, and probably having trouble in school. I also like to focus on the parents in terms of, especially if we're going to be doing a parent training, which you will be in an ODD treatment. So how do the parents get along? What is their alliance? How well do they like each other? How strong is their marriage? What is their stress level? Because you're going to be partnering with the parents to work on skills, teaching skills and practicing skills. And if they're really angry with each other and not getting along, you're going to start to see sort of a breakdown in the treatment. So a really good clinical history. Maybe you're meeting with the child individually. Maybe you're observing the child, depending on what type of treatment you're doing or how old the child is. There's some really good rating scales. A lot of these are free, so you can just buy them. You're going to give them to the parents, to the schools, and that's going to give you just a more holistic or collective picture. Depending on where you live, like in New York City, psychological testing and neuropsych testing is very common, but you don't necessarily need testing in order to give an ODD diagnosis. It's good. Testing is good to rule out other things, especially learning issues, but you don't necessarily need it. And then other things like SPECT brain imaging and genetic testing are not typical for a diagnosis. You might see these in research settings, but you don't need these things in order to have a diagnosis. So diagnosing ODD, you're looking for a couple key things, and you can just look this up in the DSM-5. At least 6 months, most days under age 5, or at least 1 times a week for over age 5. Non-sibling, that's important here. Like this can't be just be happening in the home, and has 4 symptoms from the following. So losing temper. So this is like the irritability, arguing, so oppositionality, and then sort of like this anger, vindictiveness, at least twice in the past 6 months. So you're looking for, at least 4 of these symptoms. Kids with ODD have major problems with school and friendships outside the home. So if you're not seeing this, then I would be skeptical of ODD. And then, so like these kids, you take them to like a mommy and me class, or like, one of these early childhood classes, and they'll have some difficulty there. And then when we see families, usually by the time the families reach out for help with us, they really report that they're not having fun with their child. If you say like, well, when was the last time you played, or what do you like to do together? They kind of struggle with that. And that's because they're getting into these really like bad patterns of, arguing and fighting. And so parents will just tend to avoid being with that particular child, which makes the child feel terrible, obviously. So, ODD is viewed as a younger version of conduct disorder, which emerges before age 5 when acts of aggression defiance are less severe. So But you will see there is a combination. There's sort of a pathway there, and obviously you want to get away from conduct disorder, because that's when they're really trying to hurt people and getting into trouble with the law, and nothing really good is going to come out of that, and that's much harder to treat. All right, so we have our first poll here. Do you know someone formally diagnosed with ODD? So let's see here how we do. Okay, so we're hovering around 65% of people do. And that makes sense, right? It's not as common as ADHD or anxiety, but it's definitely common enough. And a lot, 8% of people are not sure. So maybe you know a kid who has it, but maybe they haven't been diagnosed yet. And maybe some people have never seen a kid with ODD. So that's good. This is good exposure. So I think you're in the right spot. So what are evidence-based treatments? Let's see here. The big one that I'm going to focus on the most is parent management training. And this is sort of a newer treatment in terms of awareness. It's been around for 20, 30 years, but it wasn't very publicly known. And so it was in research centers, but it wasn't brought into the public awareness, I would say, until the last maybe 5 to 10 years. But now we have families coming in asking for parent-child interaction therapy or parent management training. So it's wonderful. It's really, really wonderful. And the more awareness there is in the community about these, and the more providers we can train in doing parent management training, the better we'll be. So these are designed at changing the interpersonal relationship pattern. So the idea is that if you work with the parents, then you can change the relationships for the child rather than working directly with the child. And so that's sort of a shift in the psychology model of child coming in and getting therapy, and the parents being sort of in the background and getting updates. Now the parents are in the foreground, and they're really who you're targeting when you're working with a child with ODD, because usually a child with ODD is going to have a hard time attaching and working with a therapist, irrespective of their age. And again, the child is with the parents way more time than they're with the therapist, so it kind of makes sense. You need an intensive approach with a child who's on the verge of being diagnosed with ODD or already has the diagnosis. So working with the parents is going to give you a much better way of being intensive and comprehensive. So there's a bunch of different programs here. Parent-child interaction therapy, that's with kids 2 to 7, and then there's PCIT for toddlers for 12 to 24 months, which to me is really exciting because that's where it starts. You're going to see kids with regulation and attachment and irritability and overly fussy and over too many tantrums that are developmentally appropriate and poor parent-child fit. So we're doing PCIT for toddlers, which is awesome. And parent management training in general, Defiant Teens, all of these programs have similar qualities. The PCIT ones are going to have live coaching behind a one-way mirror, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. They can all be done virtually. They're sort of designed for virtual. So that's why I'm also so excited to give these webinars, is just sort of get out there and spread the word that there's so many cool virtual treatments that can be done. And now that we have telehealth, and telehealth is here to stay. And obviously any treatment that you're doing is going to be in collaboration with the school and any extracurricular settings for the child, because they're going to be having difficulties there as well. So next poll, have you ever learned parent management training? Oh, awesome. This is so cool. So it looks like, all right, so we have about 24% of people yes, and 71% no. So I love that. That means that that you are in the right spot here, which is awesome. Hey guys, let's just turn off the chat so that people cannot chat to everyone else. I think that's just needs to be disabled. And if you have a question, just let's put it into the Q&A. So key principles of PMT. So what makes PMT PMT? So there's always going to be a psychoeducation piece to it. And I'm going to talk about the coercive cycle, which is really important for kids with ODD. You're going to have sort of a CBT format where you're checking in, you're reviewing maybe the homework from last week, you're going to learn some skills, you're going to do some role plays, there might be some discussion about it, and then you're going to be assigned more home practice. So that format, meaning like if you're not doing home practice, it's not PMT or it's not CBT, maybe it's something else. So that's really, really important. You're always going to start off with what's called a teach session. And that just means that you have the parents and the therapist, no child, and just time for the parents to learn the skills. And you know, without that, like, how are the parents going to learn, right? So you need time to just be teaching the different skills. And I think PCIT is preferred because the parents get live coaching versus teaching the parents something and then they go out and practice it and come back and report back. And there's, you know, they can video record things that have happened. You can have phone calls in between the sessions, but generally the live coaching is going to be way more powerful. And so what are the skills that you're going to teach in these teach sessions? A lot of it, again, has to be around changing the relationship. So how do you change the relationship? So with kids, you change the relationship through spending fun time together. So you focus on what's called special time, and you teach these what are called pride skills to the parents. And a lot of it is just around reinforcing positive behavior. And so you have the parent and the child take turns, or the parents take turns playing, if it's two parents or just one parent, take turns playing with the child in real time, getting real-time coaching and learning how to play and have fun. And it's really not easy for a lot of parents, especially if you've gone through, you know, a year or 2 years of just high conflict. You really get into these negative patterns of paying attention to the wrong behavior, and the child sees that and they just keep doing more of it. So you teach the parent how to play with their child 5 minutes a day, and really try to change the relationship. And you know, that's the foundation of any real PMT, is figuring out how to increase more positive interactions. And it's never been more important than in kids with ODD. And so, you know, for PCIT, you're spending 8 weeks of just practicing doing this. And you would come in and you would learn the skills and you get real-time coaching, but then you go home and you practice the skills. And that's where the actual medicine is. Like if you think about, you go in to see a doctor and the doctor, you know, evaluates you, or a physician evaluates you, and they give you a script and you get the medicine. It's not the visit with the doctor which is changing anything, it's you taking the medicine every day. And so the dosing, just like taking antibiotics or anything, is from this practice at home. And so there's a lot of effort put into helping the parents learn these skills, practice the skills, figuring out barriers to practicing the skills. And some parents love it. They really, you know, going back to this growth mindset, they love the idea of getting feedback and learning from their mistakes, and they see it as an opportunity. And a lot of other parents might see it as threatening, and, you know, they're afraid of being judged or looking stupid or making mistakes. We really try to partner with the families to help them understand that, you know, this is a learning opportunity just like anything else, where we see this all the time. You know, we know the parents are doing the best they can, and we really try to build up their self-confidence so that they learn the skills faster, because it can be anxiety producing watching someone, you know, play with your child and see how frustrating it is, and how strained the relationship is. It's kind of embarrassing for a lot of parents. We have a lot of empathy for them. Another skill they're going to learn is attending and ignoring. So you learn how to ignore a lot of the minor misbehaviors and give differential attention. So it's like you're ignoring a negative behavior, but you're giving attention to a positive behavior. So like, let's say the parent is playing with the toy and the child is you know, like whining, like, no, come play with this toy, no, come play with this toy. The parent might be ignoring the whining part, but then as soon as the child says like, "Mommy, can you please play with me?" The parent would turn their attention and say, "Oh, thank you for asking me so nicely," right? So that's like you're actively ignoring the whining, but then you're giving attention to the positive behavior, the way that they talk nicely. So that's just like a quick example. You might also be teaching the parents how to use point incentive charts, which for kids with ODD, sometimes you need to start there. So the relationships are so strained, they really see people as more of objects than subjects. And so they're more interested in earning, goodies or rewards. So it might be a place to start. There are timeouts. You do teach a timeout sequence in most of these PMTs. In PCIT, you teach a timeout sequence, or, with older kids, you would, take away privileges. But again, it's only used in very, very specific situations under specific circumstances. And, it can be very effective for reducing aggression, destruction of property, and, loss of and repeated noncompliance. And then there's like a reprimands. That's another skill that you teach to kids that are doing things like jumping on the bed, where it may not be something that they really enjoy doing, and you use this whole procedure to get them to stop doing that. So this is what I was talking about before, called the coercive cycle, and this is really important as part of the psychoeducation piece. So I'll walk you through this, but you can see how this is sort of an easy pattern that develops. So the parent tells the child to do something like, "Please put on your shoes." The child ignores or says, "No, I'm not going to do it." Parent yells, "Please put on your shoes," or "Just put on your shoes." Child argues, "Leave me alone," throws sort of a tantrum. The parent threatens, "If you don't put on your shoes, you're going to, get spanked," right? Or something really over the top. Child gets afraid, and then the parent is reinforced. So the parent's coercive or aggressive or threatening behavior becomes reinforced, right? So that's like one pattern that could happen, which would be bad for the relationship. So the parent learns that the only way to get the child to comply is to become aggressive with the child, threatening. The second version of this, the coercive cycle number 2, is similar. So the parent gives the command, "Please put on your shoes." Child ignores, or whines or complains, or says, "No, I'm going to do it." Parent yells, "Please put on your shoes now." Argue. The child says, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not listening to you." Parent threatens, "Put on your shoes, or you're going to lose TV," right? Or, "I'm going to spank you," like something over the top. Child gets aggressive, right? Sort of fights back. Okay. Parent gives in, right? And now the child's behavior is reinforced. So the child learns to be coercive and aggressive in order to get their needs met. So you can see how both parent and child can be reinforced in these cycles, and these happen all over and over and over again in lots of different situations. And so the psychologist or the therapist's job is to tease apart how this is happening, which settings, and to try to give some other options. So maybe it's ignoring, or it's praise, or it's asking in a different way or a different time, but you're really trying to get ahead of this so that you're not using threatening, coercive behavior, because you really want to remove that from the relationship. So this is sort of a sample point chart that we talked about. You might use this for a younger kid. So small reward if they do the behavior. So like listening for the first time. If they listen a lot, they get a medium behavior. And if they listen even more a lot, maybe they get a bigger behavior of something like a toy or something that's even more powerful. Very simple. These behavior charts work very well in the beginning, but they have to be adjusted over time. There's ones for schools called daily report cards, which we're going to talk about. But again, the idea is that you're trying to change the patterns using these charts is one way of doing it. And you don't get addicted to having to use a chart. These sort of fade out over time, but it can be a good way of sort of jump starting a new behavioral program. So PCIT for toddlers, like I mentioned this before, I think this is really exciting, and I hope more and more PCIT clinicians can get trained in it. You can see that picture there of like the one-way mirror. So that's what our PCIT rooms look like. The parent and child are in the playroom, and then behind the mirror, the parent is getting coached. And again, this is very easy to do remotely. You don't need to come into the office. And so the difference with PCIT is obviously for toddlers is obviously the kids are much younger. But you're really focusing on teaching attachment skills. So you're using the same pride skills, the same, label of praise, but your focus is a little bit different. So you're focusing on emotion regulation and attachment. And so young kids, the theory is that they act out and they have trouble because they're not being soothed properly. They haven't learned how to use their caregiver to soothe them. And so they have these really big emotions, and there's been a breakdown in the parent-child relationship. And so instead of giving a timeout for misbehavior at this age, which is not developmentally appropriate, the parent would come in and try to soothe the child. And there's all these like very concrete steps that we teach the parent. Dr. Staper teaches the parent during the procedure that can really change the attachment style. So attachment style is sort of like core to how someone learns how to relate to everyone else in the world, like their first relationship with their parents, and that's how they get their attachment style, and then they transfer it on to other people. And so you can change the attachment style through this treatment. It's really powerful, and parents feel so good after they're done doing this. I think the trick is for parents to see it as something that could be preventative. A lot of parents, are told like, oh, we'll grow out of that. And kids do grow out of it. But sometimes they don't grow out of it completely. And so that idea of being able to be soothed or allowing other people to soothe them or learning how to soothe yourself, if they don't get that skill very early on, it's very hard to pick that back up. So that's PCIT for toddlers. So school consultation is going to be a big piece. I'm going to talk about this. So how many people have done a daily report card at school before? So we're going to do a poll here. How many people have ever used a daily report card or similar progress monitoring tool at school? Okay. So almost 50-50. A lot of people have, a lot of people haven't. Okay, cool. Okay, so we can share the results so you can see there. About 50-50. So that's good. So, and that's fine. Like, the daily report card is something that I think more people could use, and it's really helpful. And if you're the therapist or you're in the school, the idea is you're building collaboration between the home and the school. And a lot of times you're trying to support the parents, or you're trying to support the teacher in changing the behavior at school. So as a therapist, your job is to try to collaborate and build alliance with the teachers and the psychologists and the counselors. I like to ask for a 3-month commitment. So nothing is going to happen. It takes a bunch of time to get, get all the skills set up and the targets that you're going to work on, training the teachers and whoever is involved at school. It just takes a lot of time. So you have like 1 month to set it up, 1 month to run it, and then, another month to make changes based on how things are going. And you can create like a reinforcer at home, a reinforcer at school. But the idea is you're creating this connection so that like the way the child's behavior at home is improving and their behavior at school is improving. And there's a type of PCIT called TCIT, which is an extension of parent-child interaction therapy, where the therapist comes in and trains the teachers on classroom behavior management in real time. So using this coaching model, teaches the same kind of skills, and it can be really powerful in terms of changing the lots of students' behavior. Even students without behavioral problems can benefit from this, and it teaches the teachers, and there's lots of good research on it, and it has a lasting effect. And again, this is something that we do at Manhattan Psychology Group. So this is what a daily report card might look like. Just an example, it's sort of like I said, the gold standard in behavior management. It has to be used daily. There's no point in having a weekly report card. Just too much is happening every day, and it has to be intensive. And you want to try to stay with numbers and data, not narratives. A lot of people will give narratives and give them back and forth, like a narrative, like a journal book. And it's nice, and you can write nice things in it, but it's very hard to change behavior based on narratives. So I like to you can have a narrative in there, but also make sure you have some numbers. So you're going to have, start small, 1 or 2 target behaviors, like, it could be sitting in your chair or raising your hand, something very simple, very concrete, very behaviorally oriented. And then you're going to have several monitoring periods. So the more monitoring periods, the better. It's just more work for the teachers or whoever is checking them. Things that are easy for the child to understand. You're going to teach the teacher how to use a command and reminder system. So the teacher would say, hey, Josh, this is your first reminder to stay seated, or this is your first reminder to raise your hand, so that they're using the same kind of language over and over again. And then you're working with the child to create a reinforcer that is really powerful, right? Like something that's going to motivate them to try to change their behavior. And you want to do it for at least 10 days, right? Because it's going to, like I said, take time to set up, and you don't want to jump the gun. Usually these things work very well in the beginning, and then, it kind of fades out over time. People get tired doing it. And so it's really, as the therapist or the person running this program, your job is to sort of keep everyone motivated, and so that you can try for a long enough period to see, if it's actually going to work. Usually they do work. You just have to, be creative and find the right targets and the right reinforcers. For older children, so let's say, past age 4, there's a couple types of family therapy models which have some evidence to support them. Here are 2: functional family therapy and brief strategic family therapy. They're more similar than different. I think the age range is a little bit different, you can see here, but it's usually once a week for a couple of months. And the goal is that the reason why the child is having difficulties because of all these negative interactions in the home. And what you try to do is sort of identify what the payoff is for all of the people in these interactions, right? So things continue because people are being reinforced in some way. And so you go in as like a detective, almost like an interventionist, and you figure out what the payoff is to continue these negative interactions, and what would it take to change these interactions. And the thinking is that if you can change these interactions in the family to be more positive, then it will protect the child from getting into drugs or conduct problems. These are very hard to do because you need to get the whole family together, but when you do them, they can be very effective. Now, individual therapy is not typically recommended for a child with ODD, simply because they're not going to come in and want to talk about their behavior. However, sometimes you will get children with ODD who will talk. So I say CBT for motivated teens. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of comorbid symptoms that you can work on. So like anxiety or impulsiveness or anger. And so CBT could be really helpful. Again, it has to be a teen who's interested in talking about themselves. Self-monitoring, executive function training. So, a lot of kids with ODD also have ADHD. So teaching them ways of like slowing themselves down and being able to make better choices. CBT is also great for anger management and problem solving and communication and social skills. A lot of these kids are having social problems. They don't understand, sort of what they're doing to turn other kids away. And so, individual CBT can be really productive. Again, the teen has to be motivated. You also want to make sure that, the kids are sleeping and have good sleep hygiene. If you're not sleeping, you're obviously not going to feel well. And then trying to increase structure and positive interaction. So making sure they're involved in like sports and they're busy and they're supervised rather than just like hanging out after school, unsupervised. They're going to get into problems. And then there's like collaborative problem solving. That's a pretty popular book. where you try to work with the teen on solving problems together rather than sort of dictating with them, and they have backup plans for different situations, and that could be something worth trying as well. I put down a little bit about medication. It's used for like kids that are really aggressive, antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, and then you can also use stimulants. But again, you're not targeting the relational part of what makes ODD. That's only going to come from therapy. But the medication can help, reduce some of the explosive behavior or sort of the like extreme parts of the comorbid issues that they might be having. So what are the main takeaways? What are the things I want you guys to sort of take with you as you leave and then maybe go seek more information? ODD requires early detection before age 4 to prevent it from really crystallizing and turning into something that's much harder to change. Behavioral parent management training focuses on changing relationship and attention-seeking patterns with parents, right? Like that's the key here, is that you want to figure out a way of changing the way that this child relates to adults and the outside world, because something got off as when they were young, and the only way to change that is to work with them, highly repetitive, a lot of consistency across different settings. That's the only way it's really going to change. Individual treatment, again, not for all kids, but it can help some motivated teens or preteens improve some of the comorbid issues they might be having. The structured family therapies are really good at getting in there and changing like all these interactions. So, maybe you do, a round of parent management training when they're younger, it doesn't go away completely, and then you move into a structured family therapy, and it's more collaborative because the child is older and they're participating. And I do think that, this is really something that if you have a child with behavioral issues, you don't want them to sort of leave the home with behavioral issues, because it can cause all kinds of major impairments. And the older they get and the more removed they are from their parents, the harder it is to change. In terms of resources, depending on where you are, every state psychological association has like a resource directory, so you can always check in with them, and we're going to put some of these links into the chat box for everyone. Also, Psychology Today has a lot of good therapists that you can find there, and you can search by insurance. Pediatricians and schools often will give recommendations that you can trust. If you want to use your insurance directory obviously does, and then you can sort of take that and cross-check it. And then CHAD, which is for ADHD, also has resources, and I think a therapist directory for ODD. In terms of what we can provide, like, we're doing these mini webinars, these 1-hour webinars, but starting in a couple of weeks, Dr. Staper is going to be doing a 3-week educational webinar, so an expansion of what we're talking about today, much more detail, very cost effective, 3 hours, 1 hour a week. And then also she's going to be doing a 6-week virtual parenting group, which is even more intensive, clinically oriented. We give paid receipts if you want to submit for out-of-network reimbursement, a little bit more expensive, but still very cost effective. And then obviously private individual sessions if you're interested. Here are some books that I like. So Your Defiant Teen, Russell Barkley is a big player in this space. If you're interested in learning about PCIT, this is sort of the handbook for it. And then this book is pretty popular as well, The Explosive Child by Ross Green.